Welcome to Dominate Your Day, the podcast for corporate leaders, visionaries, and founders who are ready to lead from within. I'm Dana Williams, and after 25 years as a corporate leader myself, I've discovered a powerful truth. The next level of your leadership isn't about more doing, it's about more being. Today, you'll hear from a difference maker who's learned that everything they needed to transform their team and their organization was already within them. They've stopped chasing external validation and started leading from their authentic strengths, their purpose, and their values. This is what I call the internal revolution. And it is exactly what I dive deep into in my upcoming book, Internal Revolution. Lead authentically and build your personal brand from within. So let's get started and dive right in. I'd like to welcome to Dominate Your Day today, Beth Cocuzza. She's a founder of Almavina Strategic Partners, and she supports women in education and nonprofit leaderships, helping them lead with clarity and confidence. She's actually written a book that we're going to be talking about. It's actually about toxic workplaces, but it's called Promises Broken. She has an amazing background in education. She's got several master's degrees, one from the Teachers College in Columbia, and then another one from Harvard. She loves organizational management and is using the convergence of her education background along with her background in getting organizational health and working through that with Harvard, that she's kind of come up with this consulting gig. But what I love about what Beth is doing is she went through a toxic situation and you'll hear the story about her health and what happened and the triggers that happened to help her change and transform her life. So let's welcome Beth Cocuzza. Welcome to Dominate Your Day. I'm here today with Beth Cocuzza, and Beth has an interesting background. She's got some education background, some consulting background. She's also an author of a book called Promises Broken. Beth, welcome to Dominate Your Day. We're so glad to have you here
Thank
today.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I love going deep inside and figuring out the story behind the story. So, Promises Broken. Tell the audience about why you wrote this book and your story that led up to that.
Yeah. So quick recap of my sort of career background. I started off, always wanted to be a teacher ever since my younger brother was old enough to hold a pencil and sit in a chair. I've been teaching him.
Oh.
And I went to college, became a middle school teacher. And then I quickly left teaching, not because I didn't love it, but because I wanted to have a bigger impact. And so my career sort of moved into through sort of assessment, publishing, consulting, lots of different areas of education leadership. I spent most of my career in an organization that was founded by the lead writers of the Common Core state standards. And so we worked nationally on math and literacy standards.
Wow.
And then most recently, I was the chief of staff at a large charter management organization. So really large scale, big impact education organizations. I left my role at Achievement First after leading a meeting from my back on the floor because of extreme back pain that I had been experiencing for 8 months. Knew it was happening. I just kept, commuting into the city 3 days a week, going, working sort of round the clock, 7 days a week, barely taking any time for myself. I knew I had to take care of this health problem, but I just sort of kept my nose to the grindstone and said, well, who has time to go to 7 different doctors to figure out what's going on? So in that moment of the pain had gotten so bad, I had this in-person meeting. I was responsible for all of it. And I ended up spending a good deal of the first day on my back. And the next day when I was immediately on my back, I thought, okay, this is it. I
Mhm.
left the meeting, went straight to the doctor, and he told me to check into the ER. And within 36 hours, I had back surgery.
Oh my God.
So that moment, for my body finally forced me to stop, and
Mm.
it made me realize that I could not go back to that work culture because it was not working for me. I was not a fit for the expectations of my manager, for the the team that I was surrounded with. Sort of all of the factors compounded, and I begged my doctor to write me out for as long as he reasonably could,
Oh
ethically
gosh.
could, and I took that time, and I thought, I can't, I knew that if I went back, it was going to start all up again. So I left, and as I was sort of processing um, what I was going to do, I did go back after leave, and I worked for a little while after giving notice. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And as I was talking to other women about my experience, I started hearing lots of stories of women, different stories, but stories of women whose health, whose mental health, whose
Mm.
families were being impacted by the culture at their workplace. And, I've sort of always been a person who was like, oh, you should write a book about that. And I've sort of
Mhm.
always wanted to, but never really had that calling of what I should write.
Mhm.
And this was a moment I thought, you know what? I don't have a job yet. I'm thinking about starting a business. I'm not sure, I have nothing but time right now as I
Mhm.
do that work. I'm going to do it and see what happens. So that's where the book came from. And I thought it was at the beginning, I thought, it's really important. I don't just want to tell my story. My story is only one story.
Mhm.
I want to tell other women's stories. And
Sure.
so I reached out, sort of did an all call, and I was able to get 5 women who are willing to tell me their stories. They're from a variety of roles, from fresh out of college roles all the way to the most senior executive role. And they were willing to tell me their story and have it be a part of this book to talk about what's unique about being in a toxic culture at a mission driven organization.
Mm.
So that's the background. I know that was
Wow.
maybe more than you were looking for.
No, no, that's great, Beth. And I think I was just thinking one of our other podcast guests had similar story. She just kept going, right? And she
Mhm.
finally, a friend of hers said, "Wait, you've been going to physical therapy for a year. You think you're really going to get better?" And she actually took quit her job and took
Yep.
some time and decided when she went back that she was just not going to go at the pace she was at. She was going to
Right.
go at a lower pace and even refused to take a VP job or or even a director job. She wanted an individual contributor. So she was putting
Yep.
those boundaries up.
Exactly.
And I
That's
think
exactly
that's
right.
so important. So what were the commonalities you found from these
Mhm.
5 women as you were writing this book?
Yeah. So the I think the most striking or the most common element was really the element of surprise of the people who are drawn to mission driven work are generally drawn to the mission of the organization, right? They're passionate about something. They're passionate about kids. They're passionate about healthcare. They're passionate about helping people. And in mission driven spaces, the product or the outcome is human. So there's a person on the other end of it. So you get into these jobs and you're aligned with the mission. You're really excited about making a difference. And when the toxic elements start to show up, it's really easy to ignore them because you are like, well, we're doing such good work here. I can deal with that. I don't want to be selfish and put myself first. I'm helping these other people who need me. And so there's this like idealistic, you know, entry where, oh, well, we're all doing really good work. So of course everybody's going to behave really well. But
Mm-hmm.
humans are humans and they don't always show up as their best selves. And
Right.
so then when you start to see the reality coming in, then there's a lot of denial of like, well, I'm just going to keep going. I'll make this work. I'm going to ignore that. What about the kids? Even to the point where when you are um, starting to recognize that it's not okay, there still is particularly for women, there's that
Mm-hmm.
giving, nurturing, well, I not putting yourself first, right? So that was the biggest, I think, commonality across everybody, was that experience of sort of the life cycle of recognizing the reality. Um, And then there were lots of, pieces, a lot of power dynamics. So either very strong abuses of power from leaders, also hidden power structures. So when decision making and those types of power structures are not evident or clear,
Mm.
not being sure who's making the decision or why people are interacting in certain ways. So that's a big piece of it. And then trust and psychological safety is the piece that always comes up that creates a toxic culture. Is if you don't have trust among your teams and you don't feel safe to um, raise when you have concerns, you're not safe to make mistakes and then learn from them. All of that is another piece that just really showed up frequently.
When you realized that your health was faltering, were there any other signals you had before then, or are there signals that you can be looking for if you are finding yourself just off, can't get off the treadmill? You love what you do, you're doing mission work.
Mhm.
What are the signals?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest one is you see it in leadership, right? You see it in the people around you. So if there can be when things start to become patterns. So, for example, if you make a mistake and, there's a difficult conversation about it and you say, okay, I'll, do better next time. But then that mistake keeps getting brought up over and over and over again. Like
Mm,
that is not a culture of learning. That is not a place where people can thrive. And
mm,
if that pattern becomes a pattern with a manager or with a team, then that is a red flag, right?
mhm,
That is not something that you can likely change
mhm.
yourself. If it is isolated to a person or isolated to a team, there are ways that you can certainly build a team of colleagues or peers inside the organization and try and help it. But it's definitely something where at that point you recognize there's something I need to do here. Like this isn't going to go away.
Wow. So is that the
Yeah.
biggest kind of trigger you see? Are there any other triggers that
Um.
besides your health? I mean,
Yeah. I
your health
mean,
is usually the big thing, the pattern of you probably you had that back pain and you had to just do a meeting from the floor. Wow.
yes. I mean, that
Wow.
was that was definitely. There were many instances before where I should have,
Picked up.
recognized that this is not okay. I think. Um, Trying to
When you
think.
think about, I think signals, and it could be different for all of us depending on, we talk here a lot about Clifton strengths and knowing your strengths.
Mhm.
Also knowing your core values and
Yes.
knowing what's important to you and why, and people pleasing,
Yes.
no
Yeah.
boundaries, things like that. So then those
Yeah.
kind of things cause all these other things to happen, right?
Right. And I think it's not just health. I think when what's happening at work starts to impact other areas of your life, that's a
Mm,
big flag. So
mm,
relationships, your like what here's an example, what you do on the weekends. I got to a place where I think when things were really bad, where when I come back to work and people would say, "What did you do this weekend?" I would say, "I don't know. I slept. Like I watched TV all day." When you
mhm,
have no energy to do other things
mhm,
that you love on the weekends, then
mm,
that's a sign that there's something out of balance.
mm,
And I'm glad you
mm.
mentioned values because that's a piece that I often talk about with women I work with is you have to like pause and know what your core values are, really take a step back outside
Mhm,
of work and say, what do I really value? Because if
mhm,
the organization you work with does not align with the values that you value, then
mhm,
you either have to find a way to bridge that gap
mhm.
or it's not going to work, right? There's a mismatch there, and they're always going to be prioritizing things that are not aligned with your values, and that's where things are going to start to break down.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and I think it's amazing how many groups I've led, and I'm sure as you've talked to consulting with different executives, that most people don't know their core values, and so
That's right.
you stop and you can look them up on the internet. I keep a list handy, but it's
Yeah,
one of those things that I think people don't think about, but it is the doorway to your decision making. It's everything.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
powerful. So tell
Yeah.
me about some of the stories you heard and some of the
Mhm.
transformation you've heard since you've gone through this yourself and now you're helping women in the workplace understand if they're in a toxic culture and then how to transform themselves. What are some things that are coming to mind for you as you think about these stories of transformation?
Yeah. I think one thing is being just really true to yourself. And so when
Mhm.
there's a moment where you recognize that you are changing. So there were a couple of moments in the stories I tell in the book where people, there's one actually a pivotal moment where one of the women is looking in the mirror saying, "Who am I? Like, this is not," she was upset about getting some really critical feedback, and she, was in a job that was sort of knowingly chaotic, and generally she could like manage those things and keep on top of those things. And in this moment, she was, devastated, crying, and really upset, and she thought, who is this person? I don't cry at work. I don't get
Mhm.
I have a job that is about managing these pieces. What is it about this situation that is changing me and the way I'm responding to inputs?
Mhm.
And so that is, a piece. I think I experienced it where I realized that I was, I've always sort of prided myself on being a really strong manager and being very people centered manager. And I realized that the way I was managing my team was actually reflecting other people's values and I was not able to uphold my own values. And I thought, if I stay here any longer, I'm going to become a manager that I don't want to be, right? That's where the
Mhm.
values alignment showed up.
Mhm.
So I think when I've seen women be successful in making the transformation, it's when they are able to step back and look and know what they want for themselves, which frankly, like you said, people don't often know, right? You have to do that, taking a step back and giving yourself even a little bit of time to identify
Mhm.
what you really want and what you really thrive um, with, and identify the differences, and then say, is that something I can get here, or am I going to need to step away? And it's hard. It's really hard to
Mhm.
make that change. But I have found that most of the women that I work with do, whether it's yes, I need to go now, or yes, I need to set a date and work towards it, but I need to carve out that time to come up with a path that's going to get me there.
Have very many of them been able to stay to kind of have that conversation with their leader, make the adjustments and stay, or do they all tend to leave?
I wish I could say yes.
Mm.
Most of the women that I have worked with have ended up leaving. All of the women in my book, their sort of end of their story is exiting the organization. But I don't think that it's necessary. I don't think that necessarily has to be the case.
Mhm.
I do have hope that there are ways to adjust culture and to adapt, things. There are also, depending on context, there are ways that people can, depending on the issues that they're facing, they can change roles within the same
Yeah.
organization. They can, you know,
Mhm.
collaborate with other teams. They can set up boundaries. I mean, like, you were saying before, setting boundaries is the first step, to having to continue existing in a place that's not ideal for you. Is
Mhm.
okay, if the biggest issues are my interaction with Jolene and the fact that I take work home every weekend, then
Mhm.
I'm just going to set up boundaries for myself where I'm going to minimize my interactions with Jolene. I'm going
Mhm.
to, only answer emails from her during this hour of the day so that I can put that sort of blinder up the rest of the day.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to take work home anymore, right? And trying to figure out the strategies that support that boundary is
Mhm.
important. To be, really transparent about that, it's easy to say set boundaries, but if you're not in an organization that is going to allow you to set those boundaries, that's where the trouble comes in. So it's not, I never give these suggestions lightheartedly, like, oh, set boundaries, don't take
Mhm.
work home, right?
Mhm.
there's a lot that has to go into it, but it is possible in the right context to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's having that kind of relationship. You can probably think back of different leaders you've had, and I can think of different ones I've had when I can really say, I'm having a tough time and I really want to stay, but I really need to be home, or I really need, and I had that with one of them.
Yes.
I literally cried and she cried because I was like,
Yeah.
I know I'm being pulled in both directions and I feel like this is my time to be with
Yeah.
my daughter. So I took some time and she even let me work part time as a director.
Yeah.
And it was hard because nobody else was doing it at the time. And it was just really
Hmm.
hard. But I think
Yeah.
it's having those kind of relationships. I think it's different when you
Yeah.
don't have a leader that really wants to listen and help develop a plan that can
That's
help
right.
you, because we all go through seasons of life. You're in a season right now with your
Yeah.
son graduating, getting ready to go to college. You got a lot going on,
Yeah.
and there's a time, and how much you can bring into your work world based on what's going on in your personal world. So
That's right. That's
yeah.
right.
So, and I think we,
Yeah.
as women, I see my daughter, she's got 4 girls. I see her just go, 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 go. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's going to burn
Yeah.
out. But I can't tell her
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I think it's something
Exactly.
we as women tend to do. So,
Yes.
what have you
Yes.
found has helped you since you've been on this journey and you've been able to slow down and really think about boundaries and think about what you need? What has been the most helpful advice, or did you have a mentor or a coach or somebody that came along that helped you when you were going through all this, or did you just kind of figure it out yourself?
I think I definitely had friends. So my biggest piece of advice is to build a community of support.
Mm,
Both, and I think it's important to have some level of support within the organization, and it's more important to have a community of support outside of the organization. Internally, people sort of see the context and know the context. So you have that, like, a
mhm,
sort of sounding board of what's happening. It can also be really challenging because it requires a great level of trust if you're going through something really hard internally.
mhm,
The external support network is really what I have found to be the strongest piece that sort of helped me get through those moments and has helped me to sort of make the decision that I needed to remove myself from that. I think if you have a strong network of support, they can reflect back to you. Like, people would say to me, I hear you giving other people advice to
mhm,
set boundaries, to not, overdo it, to put themselves first, to put their health first, but I don't see you doing it for yourself. Right. And then to sort of reflect back to me, I thought, you tell other people to, prioritize their health, but I don't see you doing it. Right.
mhm,
So having those people who can be honest and support you, and also, for folks who are early in their career, people who can provide that perspective of, no, actually what you're experiencing is not okay. Right. I think one of
mhm,
the women in the book, it was a fresh out of graduate school in her job, and she thought that was just what work was, right?
mhm,
Was like this sort of negativity and crossing lines into like personal, comments and whatnot, and didn't really understand, because she didn't have the breadth of experience in other organizations, that actually that's not how work has to be. So that's another value of have building a network outside
I
of
love that. I think that is
the
such a
organization.
powerful idea. And I always call it your own like virtual board of directors just around you that you
Exactly.
can call on. I didn't realize how much I needed this until recently. I've had different people I'll just pick up the phone and call them and say, yeah, they're on there. I'm going to call them and ask about
Mm-hmm.
this. And I have one that has been going through cancer, and I haven't been able to get with her because she's had, a transplant, and she's been really sick. And I thought, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how much I really lean on
Yeah.
her for advice. And
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
it's been she's doing great now, but it was like, wow, so that's why it's so important to have that group of people. Um,
Yeah.
and I think trying to not only just ask one person, but get advice from 2 or 3, right? Do you do that?
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. Different perspectives are important, and in the same way, I think sort of blocking off the voices that are weighing you down. So there are
Mhm.
also like some very well-intentioned people who could be holding you back from making the
Mhm.
moves that are needed, right? Like, I
Mhm.
can imagine, you trying to make a really bold move of leaving a job that's not good for you. I actually have a
Mhm.
client right now who's trying to do that, and her very loving sister and friend are saying, "Oh, but there's so many good things about your job. Are you sure you want to go?" Right? So
Mhm.
there's an there's a need to sort of put aside the advice that is not helpful while taking it into, like, yes, I hear what you're saying. I hear, yes, those are good aspects of my job, but you're also not living my experience every day. And these things are also happening, and I deserve better than that. Right. So
Mhm.
knowing which voices to welcome as sounding boards and support, and which voices to sort of separate, not cut off, but
Mhm.
separate from
Sure. Protect
that
yourself.
topic of conversation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get in situations where we wanna fix people or other people wanna fix us. And we're like,
Right, right.
"No, I'm good. I'll get
Yeah,
my
yeah.
advice when I need it." So tell me about why you came up with this title, Promises Broken. Where'd that come from?
Yeah. So I'll just say, you have you written a book? You've written a book.
I'm writing one right
Yes.
now.
You're
Yes, and
writing
I
one.
wanna finish, yeah.
I found choosing the title to be the hardest part of writing a book
Yeah.
because it's such a commitment, right? It's like, it
Mhm.
feels like even more than naming your kid.
Yeah. It's a lot.
So it was hard, but I Promises Broken really represents this idea of, when you work in mission driven work, you are entering with feel full of promise. Like, I am
Mhm.
here. I'm going to change the world of education for K-12 students across the country in mathematics, or whatever the thing is that you're working on. And you're welcomed in often with a promise that everyone here is in it for that reason, right? And are going to do everything they can to fulfill
Mhm.
those promises. And it's a very hopeful feeling. And then little by little, it feels like those promises are broken when, decisions are made that aren't in alignment with the mission, or people don't treat each other well, or they,
Mhm.
depending on they make decisions based on finances that, aren't in the best interest of the kids, or that favor the adults over the students, or favor the doctors over the
Mhm.
patients, or whatnot. So it just felt like a good analogy of, you know the hopefulness that you enter this type of work with, and then the sort of brokenness that you feel when you're
Mhm.
immersed in that toxic culture. I did also really struggle with the negativity of the title,
Mhm.
of that being the header of Promises
Mhm.
Broken. So the subtitle is really important to me, that it's
Mhm.
about reclaiming your health and humanity when mission driven work lets you down. So
Mhm.
the idea that the experience can be a letdown, but you can reclaim your health and humanity, and you can still do mission driven work. You have to enter it with a sense of reality and intention and boundaries, and understanding of what's possible.
And we're in a phase of our society with 5 different generations at work, and the fact that I think people want to be a part of something more that makes a difference,
Mm-hmm.
mission
Mm-hmm.
driven. Um, and so being able, I think one of the key things you just mentioned there, that when you're interviewing, is telling them what are your what are your boundaries, what are you
Yeah.
looking for in a mission driven. Some of us, right, we go out there and we start interviewing and we're like, oh, I don't, so I think being
Mm-hmm.
able to be really clear on what you want, it sounds
Yeah.
like, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think the good news is that people are talking more about toxic culture, than I have
Mhm.
seen them talk about it before. And there are lots of folks providing resources out there about how to suss out in an interview,
Mhm.
like, the red flags of culture. One of the main ways is when you ask a question about culture, if the answer is very like, "Oh yeah, it's great. We're all like a family here," but there are no concrete examples
Mhm.
of that, right? So I think really digging into, can you tell me about a time when someone needed flexibility for something that was going on at home? How was
Mhm.
that received? How did that work? How were the the commitments made? How are the deliverables handled? Whatever it might be. So trying to get away from those like warm and fuzzy, everything's happy here
Mhm.
to really like give me some examples. I hope
Yeah,
that it is, but give me some examples of what you mean by that. Right.
because we're all perfectly human, and there's nothing
Absolutely.
that is going to be, oh,
That's exactly right.
there's always something that needs
Yeah.
to be worked on, but it's having that, like you said, that trust and that
Yep.
culture of trust and that psychological safety. So,
Yep.
do you mainly focus now on education since that's kind of your expertise? Is that kind of people
I know the education, like the nonprofit education industry best. And so that is sort of my, my focus when I mostly work with women in that area because I know the charter school world, I know the public school world, I know about education nonprofits and sort of how they're structured. But I think these ideas and the ideas that I share with women really apply in most nonprofit spaces, right? Like community development, I think is very similar. Some healthcare systems are. I think where I'm unsure is like when organizations get very, very large and
Mhm.
highly structured, many,
Mhm.
many levels of hierarchy and whatnot. I'm not sure I exactly know the nuances of what is happening behind the scenes there, but other than that, I think your small to mid-size nonprofit is that there are lots of similarities across.
What's interesting, I looked at your background, your education. You went to Harvard and got your master's in
I did,
education.
I did.
So,
Yep,
and here you are thinking, so, that was what, 5 years ago or something almost?
yep,
Or,
yeah.
yeah. So, when you did that, and then you probably had no idea you'd be doing this right now, right? When you were that?
It's true. It's funny. So that was my second master's, and I did that master's at a transition point in my career, and it's actually that experience is part of why I'm doing this leadership coaching for women who are sort of moving from senior management to executive management. I had been at an organization the same in growing roles, but in sort of the same senior role for 10, 11 years. And I
Mhm.
knew I wanted to do something different, but I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And so I had, because it was COVID, and all of my travel stopped, so things slowed
Yeah.
down a little bit. I had the opportunity to go to Harvard virtually. It was the full Harvard master's program, but it was all online.
Wow.
And otherwise wouldn't have been able to do it. I had kids in high school at the time. So I was able to, my degree there is really in um, more focused on organizational leadership.
Mhm.
So while I was from the Graduate School of Education, I really spent the time leaning into what is it I have liked most about my
Mhm.
work in the past few years. And while the content of the work I was doing was education, math standards, ELA standards, what I really loved was building the organization and was
Mhm.
building the systems that help the organization function effectively and all of that. So that it was that experience that led me to the chief of staff role. And then that really has led me to all of this work around how organizations function, effectively and treat their people well and then thrive in the long run.
I love that. It's funny because we go out, like what you just described, your story of going and saying, "Well, I've got this opportunity. Let me go get my degree, another degree
Yeah, yeah.
at Harvard, and I can do it at home." Wow! But then look what it led you to,
Yes,
and it's like this congruence of all these different experiences you've had, and then how you've been able to transform yourself with that
yeah,
and be
yeah,
your authentic self,
absolutely.
serving others.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So Beth, as we get ready to close out, you've shared a lot of wisdom for women who are looking at where they're working and how their health is and the triggers. Is there anything else as we get ready to close out that might be coming up for you that maybe I didn't ask you that is coming on your heart right now that you want to share with our audience as they?
Yeah, I think the most common the most common thing I hear from women is I don't have time. And we started this call with me saying, "Oh, everything's chaos. I'm moving and my, graduation party and whatnot." So it always feels like you don't have time.
Mhm.
But so the thing that I want to say is if something is not right, you do have time. If something doesn't
Mhm.
feel right in your heart about what your current situation is,
Mhm.
you can make the time that you do have time. And it's important to find it because if you just keep going forward without making the time to step back and say, what is I really want?
Mhm.
And what do I value, and how can I find what aligns with that? You're always gonna feel like you're behind, and don't never have that time to do that.
And I love the fact that you took action and said, okay, this
Yeah,
is what I've got to do. And that led to each
yeah,
thing, led to the next thing, led to the next thing.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
where can people find your book, Beth? What's the best place to find it?
Yes, that my book is on Amazon. They can also find it on my website, which is almavina.com. And there's a page there that where it can be ordered directly, or it is on Amazon as well. So either
That's
place.
great. That's great. We'll put that in the show notes. We
Awesome.
so appreciate you taking time today to be with us in the midst of a move
Absolutely.
and a graduation party and a coming back from being with your son at a orientation. So,
Yep.
mom, but you're designing your day instead of living by
Yep.
default. So
That's right.
that's the difference, right? And you get
That's
to feel
right.
that.
Exactly.
So, well, thank
That's
you
right.
for sharing your story today, and thank you for being with us.
Absolutely.
And we look forward to hearing more of your story as it unfolds and as you
Great.
begin to continue to help other women. So, thank you for being here today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Mhm. What an incredible conversation. Remember, everything you need to lead with greater impact is already within you. You don't need to be more productive, you just need to be more you. If today's episode resonated, please subscribe and share it with a fellow leader who's ready for their own internal revolution. And if you're ready to discover what's possible when you lead from the inside out, I'd love to create space for that conversation. Head to danawilliamsco.com for resources and to book your free discovery call, where we can explore what you want to achieve for yourself, your team, and your organization. Until next time, keep leading from within.